Securities and financial planning offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to investing.
Welcome to Planning for Win Financial Guidance in Life. I'm Kevin Pinkley. Thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be discussing COVID and mental health issues. And Michael Erickson is joining us today. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Michael, if the listeners want to reach out to you, how would they contact you?
Well, the best way to go it would be to go through my website, which is ericksoncounseling.com. It's available anywhere. All my contact information is available. All my credentials, everything that one could need to make an educated decision, whether to make an appointment or just call for a consultation or get any background information on anything's covered today. I'd love to provide facts and statistics and any type of studies that I might cite for the fact checking.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael. Well, COVID and mental health issues, where would you like to start today?
It's just an explosion of areas we could go into. I think the safe word today is raspberry, in case I get on any of my soapboxes. And so I'm going to do the best I can not to do that and avoid any type of hot button issues that might take this conversation in a different direction. I want to be very informative and educational and encouraging. I want people to have a healthy understanding of what is factual and where we sit today in this current pandemic.
Well, maybe we could start with maybe what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and things that maybe people could do, should do, and shouldn't do.
Well, primarily my practice is office-based. I have a private practice where I see clients. I do individual couples work, and I see a lot of kids, a lot of children, adolescents. And I've always seen a lot of children, and I've got a balanced practice, adults and children. And so in my experience, since this pandemic first started, I'll say officially in March when they did the lockdown, mandatory lockdowns, I continue to see a lot of children, mostly through Zoom and some other virtual counseling. I do some contract work with various foster care organizations, one out in Hockley it's an 88-bed facility where children from all backgrounds will go to stay for a variety of reasons. And I've been continuing that practice. I talked with about at least a dozen kids every between Tuesday and Thursday. My experience, and I want to preface this by saying I'm generalizing to some degree, just for the sake of time. For the most part, the children have been very resilient and very accepting of the new structures that are placed on them. The number one factor, I think, is boredom that kids complain about. That is by far and away the biggest issue that I think families and children are dealing with right now. I was shocked by the lack of fear, the lack of concern about their personal safety. I was really prepared for that, and so I did a lot of stress testing on children. We implemented an anxiety check-in study or an assessment that I went through all the kids that I see, and so I did an assessment to study the anxiety that they're experiencing, so I could handle it, help them process it. And I found far and away the kids were more dealing with the lack of structure, the elimination of the school activities, the traditional in a sense. I mean, they do homeschooling, of course, but lack of structure, lack of outdoor playtime. There a lot of the very healthy, constructive activities that children were once engaging in were taken from them, and so it was a huge problem. So I noticed a lot of frustration and boredom, which translated into, I guess, a type of stress from a child's perspective. The adults, on the other hand, I was again a little amazed at the lack of concern for their own personal safety. They acknowledged that there was the potential risk of getting the virus, and they were oftentimes afraid for their loved ones, elderly in particular. They were concerned about what the financial impacts, how this would create job loss, a lot of unemployment, a lot of jobs were furloughed or outright eliminated, a lot of just unemployment. So families had a lot of time on their hands as well, and oftentimes we, depending on the person, of course, people tend to ruminate and obsess about what's out of their control, and so things that were once taken from them that were very healthy activities, jobs, work, family interactions. They couldn't see their family face to face. They couldn't have the interactions that they once had that brought them, a lot of joy and contentment. And I think overall there was a general sense of loss of peace. This was very upsetting, and I'm not sure if I can say it was traumatic. I think for some folks it was traumatic. Overall, adults were very pragmatic in their thinking. They were looking at their job, their work. They were stuck at home with children. They had no clue how to homeschool, and so they were being given, being given assignments to complete. And I think the educational system is such that it's very structured, and the teachers have a clear understanding of what they're trying to accomplish, whereas us parents, we sit down and do research papers and mathematics, and it's just it creates a lot of stress on families.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the children first, because I think sometimes people want to lump everybody into the same category. And 8-year-olds and 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 58-year-olds, and everybody has different concerns and handles it differently. And then sometimes, do you think we make the mistake of assuming everybody's reacting or handling it the same way or has the same thoughts, but they're just at different places in time with ages and experience? And so that's probably not a good thing.
Well, children are at different developmental levels, and you can look at age, but in my practice, I need to look at developmental abilities, cognitive abilities, whether a child has the ability to abstract reason that this will end, that this is going to come and go. I think a lot of, personal experience plays into that. Children, if they have had a traumatic history, this might be impactful because they may not necessarily understand that it will come and go. They might see that it has potential of sticking around a while, or it was similar to a traumatic event that they experienced early on in life, and so there may be some regression. I have some kids that struggle with bedwetting, of all things, regressing in their developmentally age-appropriate behaviors. They were regressing out of those age-appropriate behaviors. They're turning more toward non-age-appropriate toys, playing with Hot Wheels, when maybe this child was more into outdoor activity, sports, riding bike, that type of thing, and they might be regressing in that sense. So there are a lot of factors to consider with children. But overall, boredom is an incredible, that's a topic all in itself. What do we spend, how do we spend our leisure time? Leisure time is very important to people, and when children are stripped of those coping mechanisms, they oftentimes have a lot of time on their hands.
Well, you mentioned boredom and lack of structure, and things are different, and I'm seeing more of it, and hopefully it's happening not just where I'm seeing it, but I'm seeing more, and I'll say children, I would say, 18, 19 and below, out on bikes, out on scooters, out playing some kind of ball, and walking around. I've seen more kids walking around with fishing poles this last 30 days than I've seen in a long time. And so that's I like seeing that's good. It's almost like going back maybe to like our childhood, where I think a lot of us spent a lot of time outside, and it was structured but yet unstructured.
Right.
And I was at a park a few days ago, and the number of teenagers that were out there with fishing poles and corks, and I've been through that park for the last probably 20 years, and I saw more yesterday than I would normally see in 6 months. So it was great. Yeah.
And that's the silver lining to all of this. I don't want to be a chicken little, and that's extremely encouraging that kids are finding opportunities to use skills that maybe weren't available to them. I mean, a large percentage of kids are turning to Fortnite and video games to pass the time. However, there's been an influx of folks using healthy outdoor skills, fishing, biking. A funny story, we bought a bicycle for my daughter back in March, and it was interesting trying to find a bicycle because the stores were so depleted with their supplies. And so then a few weeks later, my wife wanted a bicycle, and so I purchased a bike for my wife, and it was very challenging to find a bicycle. You know, we finally did, but it's a good and bad situation. You know, people are buying bicycles. It means they're using them. It means they're getting outside, and I do see in my neighborhood as well a lot of fishing, a lot of biking, a lot of walking, a lot of outdoor activities.
Well, yeah. The first thing I noticed is I didn't know so many people had bicycles because you normally didn't see them. And then the other thing, I didn't realize people had so many dogs because, I mean, I walk every day with the dogs, but I was seeing people that I've never seen before, and they're never seen their dogs before.
And I've had the opportunity to meet most of my neighbors that way.
Yeah. Well, and I have noticed one thing that I think generally in our part of the country, you know, we're probably pretty open and friendly, and we greet people maybe more than in other parts of the country. So it's here anyway. But I mean, when I'm out and about, people probably are going out of their way to say hello and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and I mean, they did it anyway, but I'm at least where I'm day to day, I'm seeing more of it, and so that's good to see instead of people, and I don't know the term, closing down and just, you know, walking through life with their head staring at the concrete. So it's good to see some of those things. So
I think people are using their coping mechanisms, and I've really I've observed folks that have healthy coping mechanisms. They've been expanded. Those are folks that are typically walking their dogs or outside riding bikes. And something that we can probably touch on later are the lack of coping skills, the unhealthy mechanisms that people deal with the boredom and lack of structure, this excessive amount of time now that we have. You know, alcoholism is up 67%, domestic abuse is up 78%. So there are a lot of things that are going on within the home that we're not, that may not show up in the news, but it's the collateral damage to this pandemic, and that relies upon healthy coping skills.
Well, when you mentioned earlier in the household, whatever someone's household looks like, and that maybe the previous structure's not there, I mean, how does one go about, I mean, I have some thoughts, but how does someone go about creating new structure that's productive and healthy when maybe some of the opportunities that they had before have now changed?
It's a whole change in paradigm. I don't want to use a lot of the cliche strategies that I hear. I listen to some of the public radio shows that have been offered, you know, nationally. And so I want to stay away from a lot of the cliches, but it's important to create a structure within the home. I would say a lot of folks are staying at home because their jobs have been shut down, the schools are shut down, folks are isolated, they have the sense of loneliness, isolation, and so I really believe that it's important to find a structure. Sleep schedules are way off. Folks are just kind of getting up whenever they want to, and that you know is good and bad. You know, it gives us. If it was short term, it wouldn't be so bad. We would be able to get caught up on our rest. But when you're talking about a 3-month span, some people digress into sleeping 12 hours a day or not sleeping. They're up, you know, all night, and then they sleep all day, and those are some very unhealthy strategies, very unhealthy structures. So it's important to keep something in place, such as a routine structure, getting up at a set time, having routine meals, having a sense of normalcy. Children need that. Children crave structure, and when they don't have that, that's what creates a lot of boredom, anxiety, and stress. And sometimes it allows them to get into some behaviors that might not be healthy.
Well, I had a friend that had served over 30 years in the military and served in combat, and I'm not comparing this situation to combat, but someone had asked him one time about dealing with the stress, and that's probably not an accurate word for combat, and the unknown and maybe the loss of structure and maybe control in day-to-day life. And he says, look, it's real simple. He says, when people, when bad things happen or when they're really scared or feel like they've lost control, is when they don't have a purpose for that day. And he says, my goal was to keep myself and everybody busy, and it wasn't just busy work. It was something that needed to be done, and I explained why it needed to be done. He says, versus leaving someone for hours and hours and days without a structure, he says, all you do is sit around and worry. And he says, that's not healthy in any situation, and it affects you and affects everyone around you. And he's like, you have to have a purpose for that day. And if the purpose is the day, as you said, getting up at a certain time, making your bed, getting dressed, okay, not laying around in your underwear all day.
Pajamas, right.
Yeah, and doing something. And it's amazing that just those simple things make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And
it's important. Structure is very important, and I think that's the number one thing that maybe some of these stay-at-home families can implement is getting up at a set time, whether their kids want to or not. If they have teenagers, they're going to want to sleep all day. That's just how it is. Trying to implement a structure when they do their schoolwork, make it every day at 8 or 10, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Just do it, and then implement regular meal times, just so there is a sense of normalcy. If we sit around, by default, we worry, we ruminate, we become, we sometimes are pulled into despair, hopelessness, and some things that once were very enjoyable, Netflix binging,
right?
On any given day, that might be a great way of relieving stress. But when that's the lifestyle, when that's what you're doing every day, searching for the next series to binge on, it gets old. I have kids that spend 8 hours a day on Fortnite, and that's troubling.
Well, so talking about the household, there's probably more people in the house for an extended period of time now than there would be normally. And you had talked about having a structure and working together as a family, whether if the family is 2 people or 16. But is it important for people to have their own space and have some privacy during this? So I don't know. Is always having people together a good thing, and having doors open all the time? Do people need, time during the day to kind of decompress and get away and have their own thoughts? And I mean, I'm not saying that needs to go on for hours and hours and hours,
Right.
but, sometimes just, hey, I'm going to get away to some quiet place. Is that?
Well, and sometimes too much of a good thing is
Yeah.
is detrimental to our health. The social isolation increases. Kids oftentimes spend a lot of time in their room anyway if they're teenagers. So the family unity might be in jeopardy, or it may be strengthened. My wife and I think, are getting along as well now as we have at any point in our marriage. We found activities to do together. We've done a ton of landscaping. We've done, we go on bicycle rides together. We do all sorts of things. I don't like game night because I think that's another one of those cliche things. But you know what? It worked for generations where they would have game night and board
Right.
games and things like that. And it creates family unity. And we've been able to have some sit-down conversations with our children that we maybe wouldn't have had otherwise. There's a lot of interaction that could be there If it's not, then that might be a maladaptive coping skill that parents are implementing. There's some avoidance. There's some folks want to stick their head in the sand and act like this isn't real. So it's very relative. Every family is different. Some parents just are not coping well, and they take it out on the spouse. And so I found a number of couples contacting me for couples counseling that once maybe wouldn't have taken advantage of. And that's both good and bad. It can be very helpful, although it oftentimes reveals some issues that were there and to begin with. And it just manifests itself. The crisis manifests itself in struggle.
Okay. You had mentioned conversations with children. So is it good or productive to have, and I'll just say, an age-appropriate conversation with children of what's going on and kind of keeping them informed and answering any questions they might have? I mean, they have access to news and information anyway, and then, their peer group. So, I mean, to some degree, is it important to have a conversation with them, or some people are like, hey, we're just not discussing that? Or, I mean, what do you think makes sense?
It's very situational. You don't want to isolate the children from world events that are certainly obvious, because it becomes, an elephant in the room. It's very age appropriate. A lot of high school kids, I use it as an intervention. I talk to them about the science of the virus, the science behind the pandemic. What are real precautions? What are risks? How we can decrease the contraction of the disease. So I educate them with tools that work: hand washing, social distancing, touching, things like that. Staying at home, the things that are proven that will decrease the contraction of this disease. And so, and information is power. Unfortunately, the media is just saturated with information, and with anything, they want you to tune in to their shows, to 5, 6, and 10. They want you to tune in so they can sell you soap and copper pans, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. However, when we're inundated with just an abundance of information, I find myself being overwhelmed by all the information, the statistics, and I'm one that I want the media to give me the raw data and allow me to interpret that data for myself. Children, they're sponges, and the way that adults handle that information, the way that adults handle crises, it trickles down to their children. And so if a parent is demonstrating a lot of stress or anxiety or depression, then that trickles down to the children, and then they may be, impacted by that, or they will be impacted by that. So it is important to have a conversation that's age appropriate. It's important to help them understand what the COVID is and what it is not. It is not, it's not something that we need to be overly afraid of. Fear is not our friend in this situation. Fear adds to the panic, and children need to know that one day we will be back to, another cliche, a new normal. The kids will be going back to school. The kids will be interacting with their friends again. Children will have play dates. They will be able to implement the parks, the activities that were enjoyable before. They're going to be there again.
Right.
So I need hope. I need encouragement from parents. I want them to be positive, and even in the face of trauma and tragedy, even if a parent is struggling with finances, the children don't necessarily need to understand the complexities of that issue. They can hear that, hey, we may have to cut back for a little bit. Our summer vacations might be postponed. We may need to do some other things as far as summer camps, and help the children understand that things have changed a little bit in this country, well, a whole lot of it. That for children, just to let them know that there will be some differences, but they're going to be okay. We need to be optimistic and encouraging with our children.
I think it makes sense. No, our children, and they're older, but they had a lot of questions, and I think we got ahead of probably a bunch of questions. And but yeah, so things now are maybe more involved right now with making decisions of, one of the questions was, hey, are we going to head out of town and go to the state that we always do during the summer? And this was early on, and it was like, well, we plan to, but, things need to be open. The parks and the hotels and everything needs to be open, and right now they're not. So we're going to have to wait a little bit versus, last year, the only thing was what day are we loading up the car and heading out of town? So, it makes sense to answer those questions.
It's frustrating.
Yeah.
And kids, they can grasp basic concepts. That kids are so resilient. I just read a study about the resiliency of children and how they respond to stress. And it's very different than how adults respond to stress. Adults can be very pragmatic and they sort through a complex situation. Children are emotionally based. They sense what's going on and they respond. And so I think if a child feels safe, they will be safe, and there won't be as much depression, anxiety, the detrimental effects of this pandemic that may last.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good point to take a break, and we'll come back here shortly and continue with COVID and mental health issues, and be right back with Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second Saturday Divorce Workshop provides unbiased information to help you understand your options and move forward with your life. This divorce workshop is for you if you are contemplating divorce, in the process of divorce, already filed for divorce, or post-divorce. You will explore the emotional, legal, and financial aspects of divorce from professionals who have guided others through divorce. For more information on this divorce workshop, contact secondsaturdaywoodlands.com or call 832-375-0900.
We're back. This is Planning for Win Financial Guidance in Life. Thank you for joining us. We'll continue with COVID and mental health issues with Michael Erickson. Michael, where would you like to go next with this conversation?
One of the things that this week has weighed heavy on my heart is a new study that was released by the Well and Being Institute. It's a wellness institute, I believe, out of Oakland, California. And they were presenting some numbers of the collateral effect of this pandemic, and I haven't noticed a lot of attention given it into the major media outlets. They focus more on the science and interventions that our government is or isn't taking, and oftentimes get sidetracked. And so one of the issues that was very disturbing to me was a study that I read considering the collateral damage to the COVID situation. And what the study did was break down things that are directly caused by the virus itself and things that are indirectly caused by the virus. Obviously, directly, you're looking at sickness, the folks that are contracting the virus and either may or may not be hospitalized. We're talking about the contagious effects of the disease spreading. And though we have some safe interventions that lower the risk, such as hand washing, of course, and social distancing, that type of thing. Some are choosing to wear masks. I know that there's been some mixed information over the last 3 months, whether those are effective or whether those are not. And my concern in that, and I want to reemphasize, I'm not an epidemiologist. I do not have a medical background. So when I hear folks talking about what they think they know about this pandemic, it sometimes concerns me because we get a lot of information from social media. We get information from various news outlets that might play a snippet of something that a very credentialed medical professional will say, and and then what we hear is oftentimes different than what is being said. And so we use a lot of tactics that help us feel better, like going to the store with a mask. And I'm not going to debate the science, of course, but things that make us feel better, the gloves, the personal protective equipment that folks are implementing. That's all well and good. But there's, with this new study that was just highlighted, death from despair, and that is exponentially on the rise. And they're predicting there could be upwards around 150,000 deaths per year as an increase due to the pandemic. And they estimated that a mean of about 80 deaths per year would be a realistic number. I haven't looked at any of the current statistics, but that's just right in line with what the actual pandemic is causing in deaths from COVID. So deaths from despair covers things like heart disease, depression, alcoholism, things that impact us emotionally, physiologically, and ultimately lead to early death.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. So I saw something kind of similar to that on the economic side, where we probably don't have a lot of information in this country on viruses affecting the economy and then the deaths that are associated with it afterwards that aren't directly related to the virus. But we have decades and decades and decades of decades of information where we have severe economic downturns where people are unemployed. And the numbers have been out there for years that when you see 20% unemployment in this country, you see about 70 to 75,000 deaths related to that through health issues, physically health issues, or maybe people affecting their physical being through drugs, alcohol, whether legal or illegal. So, those numbers are very close to what you're talking about. And we're not having a lot of conversations about that. So, people need to stay healthy, and we want to limit the people that are affected by the virus. But in severe economic downturns, whether they're related to a virus or not, there's an effect there, and people need to get back into the workforce and be able to make decisions for themselves.
I am not an economist, and I am not going to interpret any of the economic consequences to this. However, one of the points that stuck out in this death by despair study was it was empirically connected to unemployment, and they had a formula that they use, and for each point of unemployment as it rises, they equated that to a certain number of deaths. It was directly related to from death from despair. And as much as the worst thing that this environment has created is the politicalization of the virus. And I really wish that had not happened.
Right.
Unemployment is significantly, and I cannot overstate that, unemployment is a significant stressor, and it's disastrous to a person's well-being. There are primary wage earners in families that are unable to provide for their family, and that creates an incredible amount of stress and despair in individuals. They no longer are bringing home the money that they were used to, which equates into mortgage payments being missed. Maybe some of the luxuries are being eliminated. Some of the lifestyle choices, food, what we have access to, what a family can afford at this time. They're budgeting to a degree that they've never had to budget before, and so that creates unnecessary stress. Not to mention the long-term unemployment. Many businesses will not be reopening. We hear all the time where restaurants, small businesses that sell trinkets, widgets, and they can't maintain any type of longevity, so they're gone. And so they're missing. And of course, one can turn that around and say, well, where one opportunity is eliminated, more opportunities are potentially created. However, right now, there's a lot of stress and despair.
Well, right. And, you were talking about the businesses that either definitely aren't going to reopen or potentially aren't going to reopen or can remain open. The difference is employees, whether you work for a company or you're a business owner, have always had to adapt, okay, and make adjustments. The difference is we haven't had a point in our history where they said, shut the doors and you can't have business activity. So that's different. So it's hard to adapt to that. And, what a lot of people don't understand is some of these businesses have trailing expenses. So the money that you're making today is paying for bills 30 days ago, 60 days ago, and such. So it's not that, hey, you kind of got to grit your teeth and hunker down and tough it out. It's, I don't have the opportunity for incoming revenue, which means I can't pay my past expenses, which means I can't pay my current expenses in the future because we're not open and we're not going to be open anytime soon. And then you have employees. And so until someone's really had to experience how incoming and outcoming money works, regardless with the size of the business and expenses, it's not that, hey, I'll just go find a job in another 6 months across the street. It's a totally different scenario when employers and employees have been told, don't go to work and you can't produce income and revenue. It's not a situation, as we said, that we just have to adapt to and change and innovate. And people are innovating and changing, but you're limiting their ability to make those changes because it's just, hey, the lights are off. So the opportunity is not there for them to adapt and innovate. And we have to have them remain to have the ability to adapt and innovate. And proceed.
And a year ago, if someone were to lose their job, immediately there would be resources available to them for finding a new job. And currently many companies are put on hold for that. So what you have is you've stripped a person of an intervention or a very hope-filled process that's not available to them. So the economic impacts of this pandemic are very significant, and they can't be minimized.
Well, if you take these larger businesses and industries that are laying people off by the thousands and have already had, if you asked them, so, okay, last month, let's say your revenue or income was down 30%. When you see a 30% increase, are you going to hire those people back? They're going to go, no.
Right.
We have to see a much larger, they probably have a number in their head, but it is not a recovery of what we lost. It's going to have to, the recovery's, their increase is going to have to go well beyond that, so-called 30% loss. So in some cases, they'll have a number of like, we have to see 100% increase or 130% increase because that just gets us back to normal. So
the elimination of jobs, the elimination of opportunities, that adds to the stress that's already out there. And in this study, death by despair, it significantly highlighted unemployment as a number one factor in contributing to early death.
Well, why isn't the media talking about that a whole lot?
Wow. Gosh, my bias is that they want to highlight on what they think they know, so they spread the statistics and this. They want to talk about the virus. They want to, keep that in the news. They're not talking about the collateral damage that's occurred by the pandemic. And we're in a crisis right now, and people are struggling. People don't see the hope that maybe are there, and I want to possibly change the tone of our conversation a little bit because my career is such that I provide encouragement, and I'm an optimist. but I'm also a realist and a pragmatist. When folks come in, a year ago, I would help a person, if they were unemployed, look to what's available to them and give them some hope, some strategies. And now I find people are coming in, and I'm very limited with how I can practically encourage people to get out there, get on the move and start looking. It's difficult. And so on one hand, I want to let folks know that there are a lot of positive qualities to this pandemic. Family unity has the potential to increase. New jobs. I think the technology industry has boomed. I can't find a decent webcam out there. Back in March, initially I went searching for for a decent webcam, and Amazon quadrupled the price of the cam that I had in my cart. So I decided to pass on that. If you go to Best Buy, by example, they don't even let you in the door. You have to make an appointment, and they're completely sold out. So there will be some new technologies coming available, and I assume a lot of these unemployed individuals or furloughed individuals are working on some ideas to come back stronger. So I think some businesses will thrive as a result of this process. But it's going to take some time. So when someone comes to me, my intervention is to instill some hope. I try to validate their feelings of being vulnerable, feeling out of control, feeling despair, but I also try to give them strategies that will give hope, because hope heals.
Absolutely. What I've noticed is some of the people who have either been furloughed or laid off, and they know that they're not going to go back to that same position, or they're probably sure. Some of those people are creating their own business. They've had hobbies in the past that they're very good at, and now they've decided, and rightfully so, I can earn a living doing that. And it was nothing they ever considered before. But they sat down and says, I have more control over this situation.
Yep.
And I know a person that used to do their own computer work and upgrades, and now they're doing it for people, and they ship it, through one of the carriers that are out there. And they don't have an office, they don't have a storefront. And I was shocked at the amount of money that can be made repairing and upgrading computers. And they're very busy. He probably works 6.5 days a week now. Another person was a handy person and did his own work around the house, remodeling, simple things, complicated things. And he says, you know what? I know 3 or 4 other guys that are unemployed. We got 3 trucks, 3 trailers, and we're going to work. And at first, they didn't notice that people were wanting to do these changes in their house or upgrades, whether they were luxuries or needed. But now he's like, my phone's ringing off the hook, and we're busy, and I'm having to hire more people. And, I don't know if I'm doing this 5 years from now, but I'm doing it now, and we're staying busy. So people are going to come up with different ideas because they want to, and in some cases, have to, and they're going to make it work, and they'll look back and go, that wasn't fun, don't want to do it again, but we're just going to keep moving forward.
A number of vets are getting together and creating businesses among themselves, and solidifying maybe a market that wasn't available 4 years ago. And so you will see an upsurge in certain technologies, certain invention, or jobs that weren't there, say, 4 years ago. I think people might be a little bit more aggressive with the risk taking because they have to be, and so they might see this as an opportunity to maybe do something they wouldn't have done, say, a year ago or 5 years ago. So there's some promise to this. We'll just have to wait and see.
Well, one thing that I've noticed is someone else said this, and they said something like, well, if there's one thing we learned about income and dollars, is there'll probably be less people spending tomorrow's money today, meaning there was always this notion that it's available in the future, and to some degree it's easily accessible and almost unlimited, even though there's limits to it. And now maybe we're going to look at it like maybe some other generations have of, you know what, I know I can do that, but I'm not going to. And I'm just going to wait. And I would really like to spend it doing that, but I'll be more comfortable not spending it on what I was going to.
Yeah.
So more frugal maybe. So
I think we've seen a resurgence in spiritual exploration. People are clarifying their values, their spiritual values. We're looking at people that are dealing with some chemical dependency issues that maybe were there and they were manageable to a degree, functional alcoholics, and because of family interventions, because of medical conditions that created a demand that they act, people are reaching out for help, substance abuse help. I see it in my practice. People, about every other day, I'm getting a call from someone accessing their unemployment, or their, not unemployment, but their EAP, Employee Assistance Program. They're reaching out for the resources that they have had available to them all along, but they're seeing that this is an actual, it's obtainable to them, so they act on it. And I think that's a great thing. People are engaging. Our church in particular may reach about 30,000 on any given Sunday through the various campuses, but through the streaming, online streaming, they've noticed that upwards to 200,000 IP signatures have been logging in to see the worship services, and that brings hope. And those people may not have been one to want to walk into a church building, but yet they're clarifying their spiritual values. They're reaching out and they're checking some things out that hopefully will carry on after this pandemic is over with.
Well, I was just going to say, you used the word carry on, that maybe some of these changes will stick and they'll continue with it. I think we're all making some changes, some because we need to, some because we want to, but you have to find something that is good and productive in the middle of this, and not look back on it as wasted time.
Right.
And that you didn't try to make something better or more useful out of it.
Yeah.
And I look at that, first 30 days or so when everybody was kind of hunkered down and had a lot of questions. And, you really needed to find something and do something and say, I don't know if this lasts in 3 days or 3 months or whatever, but, we just can't hole up like a bunch of hermits and
No.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm a little zoomed out. It's hard for me. It's a different, the dynamics are completely different. Personally, when I'm using telemedicine, when I'm seeing clients through Zoom or FaceTime, and it's different because I can't read a person's the body language. I can't always connect with them on a human level. And when we're watching a computer screen, I find that it's hard for me to stay in the box. I'm kind of fidgety, and I think better when I'm kind of looking around, moving, and so it's forced me, because I see myself in the mirror of the Zoom. It's forced me to be a better, more present in my listening, be a better active listener, and in all honesty, some of these folks may be more comfortable with the Zoom counseling. Maybe they'll reach out better. Maybe they'll feel less vulnerable, and more or less shame based, and more. It'll be more therapeutic intervention by accessing Zoom. It's another weapon or another tool, I should say, in my repertoire.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say it's another tool, and use it where it works.
Yes.
And where it could be more beneficial not doing it, do something
Make some
different.
productive choices.
And we went through the mad rush like everyone else did of, hey, I got to get this camera up and running, and maybe we had 2 in the office, but we really need 4 or whatever it is. And but there's there's some meetings and there's some conversations that need to be held in together, in front of somebody, and some of them that just as easily could be done like that way. And we probably shy, at least, I think I did shy away from it in the past, but it's like, hey, I'll use it when it makes sense. And then, we kind of revert back. It's like, you can always pick up the phone for things that can be handled over the phone, but some things can't. But in lieu of, I'll just send an email. Okay, well, pick up the phone. Somebody probably wants to talk to you,
And there's a mutual friend of ours that's very proficient with the Zoom interactions, and he's taught me a lot about camera, about the lighting, and about interacting with folks through these telemedicine features. And it's been enlightening for me because that's a whole new area that I may keep within my practice for a while.
Makes sense. We'll use the good and continue.
Yes, of course, adapting to crisis. That's what it's all about.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been great. And
thank you.
We could probably talk the rest of the afternoon about this, and maybe we will at another time. But so, Michael, again, when people want to reach out to you, how do they go about doing that?
Well, Michael Erickson, you can always Google me. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been in practice for over 25 years. I specialize in depression, anxiety, stress, substance abuse, recovery. I also do mediation, both civil and divorce, parent coordination. If someone is going through a divorce, I can work with the children and teach parents how to be better parent coordinators or do co-parenting. The best place would be just Google me. Erickson Counseling and Mediation is the company. And my website is ericksoncounseling.com.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to us today. This is Planning for Win Financial Guidance in Life. You can always join us the last Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m., or you can check us out online at Lone Star Community Radio. And if you'd like to give me a shout at the office, you can call 832-375-0900. That's 832-375-0900. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Securities and financial planning offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to investing.